My parents took me to court to take my house and give it to my sister. I showed the evidence and they lost. I still remember standing in my own living room 3 months ago, staring at the legal papers my father had just thrown on my coffee table. My mother stood behind him with her arms crossed, that familiar look of righteous indignation plastered across her face. My sister Joanna lounged on my couch, scrolling through her phone like this was just another Tuesday, already picking out paint colors for her bedroom. "This is ridiculous," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "You can't sue me for a house I bought with my own money. We raised you," my mother snapped. "We sacrificed everything for you girls. The least you can do is share what you have with your sister. She needs this more than you do." Joanna didn't even look up from her phone. She just smiled, that smug little smile she'd perfected over 32 years of being the favorite child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who dropped out of 3 different colleges, couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, and still lived with our parents because she was finding herself. I'd bought this house 18 months ago. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small backyard in a decent Portland neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd saved for 8 years, working overtime as a software engineer, living in a studio apartment that barely fit a bed, eating ramen more nights than I care to remember. I'd put down 20%, qualified for the mortgage on my own, and signed every single paper myself. My parents hadn't contributed a single dollar, but apparently that didn't matter, because Joanna wanted a house, and what Joanna wanted, Joanna got. That's how it had always been. When she wanted to go to private school, I got pulled out of my music lessons. When she wanted a car at 16, my college fund got raided. When she wanted a European vacation at 25, my parents borrowed $5,000 from me that I never saw again. And now she wanted my house. "You have until Friday to agree to transfer the deed," my father said, his voice cold. "Or we file the lawsuit. We've already talked to a lawyer. We have grounds." "Grounds?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What grounds?" "We helped you buy it," my mother said smoothly. "We co-signed the loan. That makes us part owners." The lie was so blatant, so absurd, that for a moment I couldn't speak. They hadn't co-signed anything. They hadn't even known I was house hunting until I'd already closed on the property. But as I looked at their faces, I saw they actually believed they could pull this off. I picked up my phone and opened my camera app. "Say that again," I said quietly. "Put that away," my father barked. But I didn't. I held the phone steady and said, "You just claimed you co-signed my mortgage. That's a lie. You had nothing to do with this purchase. And now you're threatening to sue me for property you have no legal claim to. I want that on record." My mother's face went red. "How dare you record us? In your own home." "My home," I corrected. "Which I'm starting to think you all need to leave. Right now." Joanna finally looked up from her phone. "You're being so selfish, Teresa. Mom and Dad gave you everything growing up. The least you can do is help me out now that I need a place. You're 32 years old," I said flatly. "Get a job. Pay rent somewhere like a normal adult." "See?" My mother pointed at me triumphantly. "This is exactly the attitude we're talking about. So selfish. So ungrateful. We didn't raise you to be like this." Actually, they had. They'd raised me to be self-sufficient because they'd spent all their time and money on Joanna. They'd taught me that I couldn't depend on anyone but myself because they'd made it crystal clear I wasn't their priority. Every achievement I'd earned, every goal I'd reached, I'd done alone while they cheered for my sister from the sidelines of her perpetual mediocrity. "Get out," I said. "All of you. Now. We'll be back with a lawsuit," my father threatened. "I look forward to it," I replied. They made good on their threat. 1 week later, a process server showed up at my door with official court documents. My parents were suing me for unjust enrichment and claiming they had an oral agreement that entitled them to half ownership of my house. The lawsuit demanded I either transfer 50% of the property to Joanna or sell it and split the proceeds with her. I sat at my kitchen table reading through the legal filing, my coffee going cold beside me. The document was surprisingly detailed. They claimed they'd provided financial support throughout my 20s that had enabled me to save for the down payment. They alleged they'd given me advice and assistance during the home buying process that constituted a material contribution. They even suggested they'd helped with repairs and maintenance after I moved in. Every single claim was either a complete fabrication or a grotesque distortion of reality. The $5,000 they'd borrowed from me 5 years ago, they'd reframed it as a gift they'd given me. The one time my father had helped me hang curtain rods, now that was substantial home improvement labor. My mother bringing over a casserole twice, ongoing financial support through provision of meals. It would have been funny if it wasn't so enraging. I called my friend Katerina, who worked as an accountant at a firm downtown. She came over that evening with a bottle of wine and her professional skepticism. "This is insane," she said, flipping through the pages. "Do they actually think a judge will believe this?" "I don't know what they think anymore," I admitted, "but I need a lawyer. A good one." Katerina nodded. "I know someone. Clara Pires. She handles family law cases and she doesn't mess around. Let me make a call." 2 days later, I sat in Clara's office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Portland. Clara herself was in her mid-40s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Walk me through the timeline," she said, pulling out a legal pad. I did. I started with my childhood, explaining the family dynamics and Joanna's favored status. I detailed every dollar I'd saved, every promotion I'd earned, every sacrifice I'd made to afford the house. I showed her my bank statements going back 8 years, proving the steady accumulation of savings. I pulled up the mortgage documents showing I was the sole borrower and owner. "They didn't co-sign?" Clara asked. "They weren't even on the application. The bank has records." "And they're claiming they helped you financially?" "The opposite, actually." I opened my phone and showed her my Venmo history. "Here's the $5,000 they borrowed and never paid back. Here's another $2,000 from 3 years ago. Here's $800 from last Christmas when they said they were short on their electric bill." Clara's expression didn't change, but I saw her pen move faster across the page. "You kept records of all of this?" "I keep records of everything," I said. "It's just how my brain works. Every transaction, every conversation that matters, every agreement. I have emails, texts, bank transfers, everything." "Everything?" Clara leaned forward slightly. "Everything." For the first time, she smiled. "Then we're going to destroy them." Meanwhile, my parents were escalating their campaign. They showed up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby until security escorted them out. They called me at all hours, leaving voicemails that alternated between guilt trips and threats. My mother left a message crying about how I was tearing the family apart. My father left one saying they'd make sure everyone knew what kind of daughter I really was. But the worst part was Joanna's social media. She started posting about her new house. She shared Pinterest boards of bedroom decor and kitchen renovations. She posted photos of my actual house, taken from the lawsuit documentation, with captions like, "Can't wait to move into my new place," and "Finally getting the space I deserve." Her friends commented with congratulations. Some of them even asked for the address so they could come see it once she moved in. She responded to every comment, playing the role of excited new homeowner, never mentioning that she didn't actually own anything. Katerina showed me the posts with barely contained fury. "She's acting like it's already hers." "Let her," I said quietly. "Let them all get comfortable with the fantasy." Because I was building something they didn't know about. Every threatening text message, every voicemail, every social media post I was documenting and forwarding to Clara. She was building a file that grew thicker by the day. "They're making this easy," Clara told me during one of our meetings. "Most cases like this come down to he said, she said. But your parents are creating a documented record of harassment and false claims, and your sister posting about the house as if she owns it? That's going to look very bad in front of a judge." "How bad?" I asked. Clara's smile was sharp. "Bad enough that we're going to countersue for legal fees, emotional distress, and defamation. By the time we're done, they're going to regret ever filing this lawsuit." My parents' lawyer sent demand letters. Clara responded with requests for documentation of every claim they'd made. They couldn't produce evidence of co-signing because it never happened. They couldn't show proof of financial contributions because there weren't any. Their entire case rested on their word against mine. But I had more than my word. I had 8 years of financial records. I had mortgage documents. I had emails from the real estate agent, the loan officer, the home inspector, all showing that I'd handled the purchase entirely alone. I had text messages where my parents explicitly acknowledged I'd bought the house myself. One message from my mother, sent right after I'd closed on the property, read, "Congratulations on your new house. We're so proud you did this all by yourself." Clara added it to the file with visible satisfaction. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. In that time, my parents tried everything. They sent my aunt to guilt trip me. They had my cousin call and plead for family unity. They even had their priest contact me to talk about forgiveness and sharing. I told every single one of them the same thing. See you in court. The harassment intensified as the court date approached. My parents started driving by my house at odd hours. I installed security cameras and caught them on video, peering through windows, testing door handles, even trying to use what looked like an old key they thought might still work. It didn't. I'd changed all the locks the day after they'd thrown the lawsuit papers at me. But watching them try was instructive. Clara loved the security footage. "They're establishing a pattern of boundary violation," she said. "Keep recording everything." I did. I recorded my mother showing up at my office building 3 more times, once with Joanna in tow. They'd tried to get past the front desk, claiming it was a family emergency. My coworker Jessica had filmed the entire scene on her phone when security got involved. My mother screaming that I was an ungrateful daughter, Joanna crying theatrical tears about how I'd stolen her future, security guards physically guiding them toward the exit. "This is gold," Clara said when I showed her Jessica's video. "But it's also concerning. Have you considered a restraining order? Will that hurt the lawsuit? It'll help it. Shows you're the reasonable party trying to protect yourself from their escalation." We filed for a temporary restraining order that same week. The judge granted it immediately after reviewing the security footage and the log of harassing messages. My parents were ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from my home and workplace. They violated it within 48 hours. My doorbell camera caught my father walking right up to my front door and leaving an envelope taped to it. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, 6 pages of guilt, manipulation, and threats. She wrote about how much pain I was causing them, how Joanna was suffering because of my selfishness, how the family would never forgive me if I didn't do the right thing. The letter also included a new threat. If I didn't drop my counterclaims and agree to give Joanna the house, they would tell everyone in our extended family that I'd stolen money from them over the years. They'd make sure my grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all knew what a thief and liar I was. I photographed every page and sent it to Clara. Restraining order violation, witness intimidation, and now threats of defamation, Clara said. "They're burying themselves. File a police report for the violation." I did. The responding officer was sympathetic, especially after I showed him the pattern of behavior. He took copies of everything and told me the district attorney would likely pursue charges for the restraining order violation. "Your parents are making a lot of bad decisions," he said carefully. "That's been true my whole life," I replied. While the criminal complaint worked its way through the system, I focused on preparing for the actual lawsuit. Clara had me write out a detailed timeline of every interaction with my parents over the past decade, noting every time they'd borrowed money, every time I'd helped them, every time they'd prioritized Joanna over me. The document ended up being 37 pages long. "This is thorough," Clara said, reading through it. "Almost too thorough. We'll need to condense it for court. But this gives me everything I need to understand the family dynamics." She also had me gather witnesses. Katerina agreed to testify about the loans my parents had never repaid, since she'd been present for some of those conversations. My former roommate from my studio apartment days agreed to testify about how frugally I'd lived while saving. Even my mortgage broker agreed to provide a statement confirming that my parents had never been involved in the purchase process. Meanwhile, Joanna's social media activity reached new heights of delusion. She posted a photo of herself holding paint samples against my living room wall. She tagged the location as "my new home" and wrote a long caption about fresh starts and family support. "How did she get inside?" Katerina asked, showing me the post. I checked my security footage and found the answer. My parents still had a key to my house, one I'd given them years ago for emergencies. I'd forgotten about it when I'd changed the main locks, but they'd used it to let themselves in through the back door while I was at work. The footage showed all 3 of them walking through my house, Joanna posing for photos while my mother directed her like a real estate shoot. Another restraining order violation, another police report. But more than that, it was evidence of their mindset. They genuinely believed the house was already theirs, or would be soon. They were acting like the lawsuit was a formality, like the outcome was predetermined in their favor. Clara filed an emergency motion to have them held in contempt. The judge granted it and scheduled a hearing. At that hearing, my parents showed up with their lawyer, a middle-aged man named Gerald, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with his clients. The judge, an older woman named Francisca Montero, reviewed the security footage with obvious displeasure. "Mr. and Mrs. Carvalho," she said, her voice cold, "you were explicitly ordered to stay away from your daughter's property. Yet here we have video evidence of you not only violating that order, but entering her home without permission. What do you have to say for yourselves?" My father started to speak, but Gerald cut him off. "Your Honor, my clients believed they had a right to access the property, given the pending lawsuit regarding ownership." Judge Montero's expression didn't change. The lawsuit hasn't been decided. Until it is, Teresa Carvalho is the sole legal owner, and your clients committed criminal trespass. I'm finding them in contempt and ordering them to pay a $5,000 fine. If there are any further violations, I'll consider jail time. My mother burst into tears. My father's face went purple with rage. Joanna, who'd come to watch, stood up and shouted, "This is so unfair! That's our house! Sit down!" Judge Montero snapped, "or you'll join them in contempt." Joanna sat, but the damage was done. Her outburst, captured by the court reporter, would be part of the official record. Clara caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of satisfaction. After the contempt hearing, my parents' lawyer requested a meeting with Clara. We met in a conference room at his office, Gerald looking tired and my parents looking defiant. "My clients are willing to drop the lawsuit," Gerald said carefully, "if Teresa agrees not to pursue her counterclaims." "Absolutely not," Clara replied. "Your clients filed a frivolous lawsuit, violated a restraining order multiple times, trespassed in my client's home, and engaged in a campaign of harassment and intimidation. We're going to trial, and we're going to win. Be reasonable," Gerald tried. "Families shouldn't destroy each other over property. Then your clients shouldn't have tried to steal my client's house," Clara said flatly. My mother leaned forward. "Teresa, please. We're still your parents. We love you. Can't we work this out?" I looked at her. This woman who'd spent my entire life making it clear I was the spare child, the backup, the one who existed to support Joanna's dreams. I thought about every birthday she'd forgotten while throwing elaborate parties for my sister, every graduation she'd missed because Joanna had some minor crisis that needed attention, every time she'd told me to be more understanding, more giving, more selfless, while Joanna took and took and took. "You never loved me," I said quietly. "You loved what I could provide, the money I could lend, the problems I could solve, the resources I could give to Joanna. That's all I've ever been to you. A ATM machine with a daughter-shaped front." "That's not true," my mother gasped. "It is true, and we both know it." I stood up. "See you in court." The trial date arrived on a cold morning in early December. I met Clara outside the courthouse, both of us carrying file boxes full of documentation. She'd warned me that the trial might last 2 or 3 days given the amount of evidence we planned to present. Inside, my parents sat with Gerald at the plaintiff's table. Joanna was in the gallery, along with my aunt and 2 cousins my mother had recruited as supporters. On my side of the room sat Katerina, Jessica from my office, and my mortgage broker, all prepared to testify. Judge Montero entered, and we all rose. She took her seat, reviewed the case file briefly, and then looked at both tables. "This case involves a dispute over property ownership," she began. "The plaintiffs, Domingos and Beatriz Carvalho, claim they have an ownership interest in property located at 2847 Northeast Morrison Street, currently titled solely to the defendant, Teresa Carvalho. The plaintiffs seek a court order requiring the defendant to transfer 50% ownership to their other daughter, Joanna Carvalho, or alternatively to sell the property and divide the proceeds. The defendant has filed counterclaims for frivolous litigation, harassment, and emotional distress. We'll begin with the plaintiff's case. Mr. Gerald?" Gerald stood and began his opening statement. He painted a picture of dedicated parents who'd sacrificed everything for their daughters, who'd supported Teresa financially throughout her 20s, and who had a reasonable expectation that they'd share in the benefit of the home they'd helped her purchase. He characterized the lawsuit as a simple dispute over an oral family agreement that Teresa was now trying to avoid. It was all very sympathetic, very emotional, and completely disconnected from reality. Then Clara stood for my opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is about entitlement, not equity. The plaintiffs made no financial contribution to the purchase of the property in question. They didn't co-sign the mortgage. They didn't provide the down payment. They didn't help with closing costs. What they did do was borrow thousands of dollars from Ms. Teresa Carvalho over the years, money they never repaid. What they did do was prioritize their older daughter, Joanna, throughout Teresa's life, providing her with financial support while expecting Teresa to be self-sufficient. And what they're doing now is attempting to use the court system to take property they have no legal right to, simply because they believe their daughter owes them something for the basic parental responsibilities they failed to fulfill adequately." She paused, letting that sink in. "Over the next 2 days, we will present clear and convincing evidence that this lawsuit is not only meritless, but was filed in bad faith as part of a pattern of harassment and manipulation. We will show bank records, mortgage documents, and testimony from multiple witnesses. We will show security footage of the plaintiffs violating a restraining order and trespassing in Teresa's home. We will show social media posts where Joanna Carvalho falsely claimed ownership of the property before any court decision. And we will ask this court not only to dismiss the plaintiff's claims with prejudice, but to award substantial damages to Teresa for the harm they have caused. Gerald called my father as his first witness. Under questioning, my father testified about how hard they'd worked to raise 2 daughters, how they'd always treated us equally, how they'd provided emotional and financial support throughout our lives. And did you contribute financially to Teresa's ability to purchase the house? Gerald asked. Yes, my father said. We gave her money over the years, thousands of dollars. Did you expect to be repaid? No, it was family help. That's what families do. Clara's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Carvalho, you testified that you gave Teresa thousands of dollars over the years. Do you have any documentation of these gifts? It was cash, mostly. No checks, no bank transfers, no records at all? No. Interesting. Clara pulled out a document. Because I have records of multiple Venmo transfers from Teresa to you. Here's $5,000 in June 2020 with the memo, loan for car repair. Here's $2,000 in March 2021 with the memo, help with bills. Here's $800 in December 2023 with the memo, electric bill help. These aren't gifts to Teresa. These are loans from Teresa that you never repaid. My father's face reddened. Those were different transactions, were they? Because you just testified under oath that you gave Teresa thousands of dollars. But the only documented financial transactions between you show money flowing in the opposite direction. So either you're mistaken or you're lying. Which is it? Objection. Gerald stood. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Montero said. But I'll allow the question in a different form. Clara nodded. Mr. Carvalho, can you provide any evidence whatsoever of money you gave to Teresa? Long pause. No, thank you. No further questions. My mother testified next, claiming they'd provided ongoing support through meals, childcare advice, and help with home maintenance. Clara shredded that testimony too, pointing out that I had no children, needed no childcare advice, and had documentation from professional contractors for every repair done to the house. Then Gerald made a crucial mistake. He called Joanna to testify. Joanna took the stand wearing what I recognized as a new dress, probably bought on credit she'd never pay off. She smiled at the judge like they were friends meeting for coffee. Ms. Joanna Carvalho, can you describe your relationship with your sister? Gerald asked. We've always been close, Joanna said. Teresa is like my best friend. That's why I don't understand why she's being so difficult about sharing the house. Did Teresa ever indicate she planned to share the property with you? Yes. She told me when she was buying it that there would always be room for family. She said we'd always have a place with her. It was a lie. I'd never said anything remotely like that. Clara stood for cross-examination with visible anticipation. Ms. Joanna Carvalho, you testified that you and your sister are very close. Is that correct? Yes. When was the last time you visited Teresa before this lawsuit began? Joanna hesitated. I'm not sure exactly. Was it within the last year? Probably not. 2 years? I've been busy. I see. So you're very close, but you haven't visited in over 2 years. Now let's talk about your social media activity. Clara pulled out printed screenshots. This is your Instagram account, correct? Yes. And this post from 6 weeks ago shows you holding paint samples in Teresa's living room with the caption, "Can't wait to decorate my new home." Did you post that? Yes, but... And this post shows you in Teresa's kitchen with the caption, "First meal in my new place coming soon." Did you post that too? I was just excited about the possibility. These posts weren't about possibilities. They stated ownership. You called it, "My new home," and "My new place." You even tagged the location. Isn't it true that you were acting as if you already owned the property, despite having no legal right to it? Joanna's face flushed. I just thought, after the lawsuit, it would be mine. After the lawsuit. So you were counting on this court case to give you property you didn't purchase, didn't pay for, and had no legal claim to. Is that accurate? My parents said, answer the question, please. Were you counting on this lawsuit to give you Teresa's house? Long, damaging pause. Yes. Clara smiled. No further questions. The second day of trial was when I took the stand. Clara walked me through my entire history. Childhood as the less favored daughter, years of frugal living, the systematic saving, the mortgage process. I explained every detail, referencing the documents we'd submitted. Did your parents contribute anything to your down payment? Clara asked. No. Did they co-sign your mortgage? No. Did they provide any financial assistance whatsoever with the purchase? No. The opposite, actually. I'd loaned them money multiple times over the years that they never repaid. How much total? $7,800, documented through Venmo and bank transfers. Gerald's cross-examination tried to paint me as cold and ungrateful, but I'd prepared for this. Every question he asked, I answered with specific facts and dates. When he suggested I owed my parents for raising me, I calmly pointed out that parents have a legal obligation to care for their minor children, and that obligation doesn't create a debt the child must repay in adulthood. After my testimony, Clara called her witnesses. Katerina testified about the loans and my frugal lifestyle. Jessica testified about my parents' harassment at my workplace. My mortgage broker testified that I'd qualified independently, and that my parents had never been mentioned in any documentation. Then Clara played the security footage. The courtroom watched in silence as my parents and Joanna walked through my house, Joanna posing for photos, my mother pointing out features like a real estate agent. The timestamp showed they'd been inside for 43 minutes, going through rooms, opening closets, even checking the garage. This occurred after the restraining order was issued? Judge Montero asked. Yes, Your Honor, Clara confirmed. They entered using an old emergency key the defendant had given them years prior, which she'd forgotten to collect when she changed her locks. This footage led to the contempt hearing you presided over. The judge's expression was stone. Continue. Clara's closing argument was devastating. She laid out the timeline of harassment, the frivolous nature of the lawsuit, the violation of court orders, the delusional social media posts. She presented bank records showing I'd paid every cent of the down payment and every mortgage payment myself. She showed emails from my parents acknowledging I'd bought the house independently. The plaintiffs filed this lawsuit not because they had a legitimate legal claim, Clara concluded, but because they believed they were entitled to their daughter's property simply by virtue of being her parents. They raised one daughter to be dependent and another to be independent, and now they're angry that the independent one won't subsidize the dependent one. This case should never have been filed. It's caused my client substantial emotional distress, forced her to incur significant legal expenses, and subjected her to harassment and even criminal trespass. We ask the court to dismiss the plaintiff's claims with prejudice and to award Teresa Carvalho damages for her legal fees, emotional distress, and the harm caused by this frivolous litigation. Gerald's closing was weak, focused mostly on appeals to family values and traditional obligations. He couldn't counter the documentation or the evidence of my parents' behavior. Judge Montero took less than an hour to deliberate. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony, she began when we reconvened. This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen in my 15 years on the bench. The plaintiffs have presented no credible evidence of any financial contribution to the property purchase. They have no documentation, no witnesses, and no legal basis for their claims. What they do have is a sense of entitlement to their daughter's assets and a willingness to misuse the court system to try to obtain property they have no right to. My mother started crying loudly. Judge Montero ignored her. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm granting the defendant's counterclaims. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay Teresa Carvalho's legal fees in full, which according to the documentation submitted total $47,000. They are also ordered to pay $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and another $10,000 for the harassment and violation of the restraining order. My father stood up. We don't have that kind of money. Then you shouldn't have filed a frivolous lawsuit, Judge Montero said coldly. The restraining order remains in effect and is now permanent. The plaintiffs and Joanna Carvalho are prohibited from contacting Teresa Carvalho in any way, coming within 500 feet of her home or workplace, or posting about her on social media. Any violation will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential prosecution for perjury, given the false testimony about financial contributions. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality. My parents sat in stunned silence. Joanna was sobbing into her hands. Gerald was packing his briefcase with the quick efficiency of a man who wanted to get away from his clients as fast as possible. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. Clara squeezed my shoulder. Congratulations. That's about as complete a victory as it gets. As we walked out of the courtroom, my mother called out, Teresa, please, we can't pay that. You're destroying your own family. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I just kept walking toward the exit, toward my car, toward my house that was mine and would always be mine. Behind me, I heard my father yelling something about ungrateful children and appeals, but it was just noise now. The judge had spoken. The law had sided with me, and they would never be able to touch what I'd built. 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch with Katerina, enjoying a rare, warm Portland evening. My house had never felt more like home. I'd painted the guest room, updated the kitchen backsplash, and planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard. Every improvement I made felt like a victory. "Have they paid any of the judgment?" Katerina asked, sipping her wine. "They're on a payment plan, $300 a month. It'll take them years." But Clara made sure the judgment is secured against their house. "If they try to sell or refinance, I get paid first," I smiled. "Every month, I get a check from them. It's like they're finally paying me back for all those years of putting Joanna first." The criminal charges for perjury had been dropped after my parents agreed to a plea deal that included mandatory family counseling, which they'd completed. The restraining order remained in effect, and as far as I knew, they'd followed it. I hadn't heard from any of them since the trial, until they'd violated it one final time. 2 weeks ago, my mother had sent a letter to my workplace, addressed to my supervisor. In it, she'd claimed I'd stolen money from my parents and that I was mentally unstable. She'd tried to get me fired. My supervisor had brought me the letter immediately, knowing the situation. We'd contacted Clara, who'd filed for contempt again. The hearing was set for next month, and my mother was facing potential jail time. "I almost feel sorry for them," Katerina said. "Almost." "Don't," I replied. "They made every choice that led them here. They could have been happy for me when I bought this place. They could have respected my boundaries. They could have treated me like an actual daughter instead of a resource to be exploited for Joanna's benefit. They chose none of those things." My phone buzzed with a notification. I checked it and laughed. "What?" Katerina asked. "Joanna just posted that she's moving back in with my parents. Again. She lasted 3 months at her latest job." I showed her the post, which included a photo of Joanna looking sad but defiant, with a caption about family bonds and temporary setbacks. Some of the comments were sympathetic, but several were from people who'd clearly followed the drama, asking pointed questions about the lawsuit and why she'd thought she could take her sister's house. Joanna had deleted those comments, but not before I'd screenshot them. "She'll never change," Katerina observed. "No, she won't. But that's not my problem anymore." I set my phone aside. You know what the best part is? I don't feel guilty. For the first time in my life, I put my needs first. I defended what was mine, and I don't feel even a little bit bad about it. You shouldn't. You earned everything you have. Exactly. And they earned everything they got too, just not in the way they wanted. The judgment against my parents had consequences beyond the monthly payments. Their credit was destroyed. They'd had to take out a loan to pay their own legal fees, secured against their house. My father had tried to get a part-time job to help cover costs, but at 56 with a spotty work history, options were limited. My mother had tried reaching out to other family members for financial help, but after the trial details became known, most of them had distanced themselves. Joanna's social media presence had shifted dramatically. Gone were the posts about her house and fresh starts. Now it was all vague references to fake people and family betrayal. She'd lost followers, lost friends, and apparently lost yet another job. They'd built their lives on the assumption that I would always be there to support them, to bend to their will, to sacrifice my own well-being for Joanna's comfort. When that assumption proved false, their entire structure collapsed, and I was thriving. I'd gotten a promotion at work, partly because I was no longer distracted by constant family drama. I'd started dating someone I met through a hiking group, a woman who respected boundaries and understood the concept of earned success. I was investing in my house, my career, and my future. Every day I lived in the home I'd worked so hard for was a reminder that I'd won. Not just the lawsuit, but something bigger. I'd won my independence. I'd won my self-respect. I'd won the right to live my life on my own terms, without the weight of their expectations and demands. My parents had tried to take my house and give it to my sister. Instead, they'd lost their credibility, their financial stability, and whatever relationship they might have salvaged with me. They'd played a game they couldn't win, and now they were paying the price. The evening grew darker, and Katerina eventually headed home. I stayed outside a while longer, looking at my house, my sanctuary, my proof that hard work and determination could overcome even family toxicity. Inside, everything was exactly as I wanted it. No unwanted guests, no manipulative parents, No entitled sister thinking she could claim what wasn't hers. Just me, my space, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes justice actually prevails. They'd tried to destroy what I'd built. Instead, they destroyed themselves. And I was perfectly fine with that.